They're Leeds United. They are third bottom, out of their hands, but we'll take a look at the betting. They host Tottenham Hotspur here, live on BT. This is the BT Sport game here. Leeds are 2.84. Tottenham favourites, 2.46. Still going for a Conference League spot. The draw available at 4.0. Both teams score yes. Heavily favoured in this market compared to the other game. 1.51 for yes. Leeds are getting plus a quarter of a goal head start at 1.82, and the goal line is 3.5, but that is shaded towards the under a good bit. Miguel, again, lay this game here, Big Sam with Leeds United. Look, I guess in some ways he hasn't quite had the time. It's not completely over yet, but I know the Opta thing that Sky always use, I think they had at Leeds relegated at around 92% going into this weekend, which I guess shows you where they're at right now.
Yeah, the big thing for Leeds is they don't need one favour, they need two. That I suppose just extends that. And also, I mean, if we're talking about, I suppose, or bringing this down to what Mark is talking about in terms of probabilities, one of the things that's been striking for me all season, or sorry, really for half the season with Leeds, is this is a squad built to a frenetic, high-pressing game, built for Bielsa, that Marsh, for all his faults, took on and was very much in keeping with that style. Javi Gracia was not that style. He was kind of halfway down along that spectrum of tactics, if you like. And Sam Allardyce is further along again. And I think that does explain why maybe he hasn't had the effect you might necessarily have expected from an Allardyce team. I think it has made Leeds quite porous. And again, that will feed into a day like this where there's going to be a bit of release about it, especially for Spurs. Actually, if you go by the last few weeks, there is an argument that this is the most forgiving game of all, because Spurs have just had this season that's completely drifting, that they all wanted to end. And yet now, just because the end is in sight in that way, you do wonder whether there'll be just that kind of strange response from the players, especially because they'll be in that heightened atmosphere that Ellen Road will have on the day. And I do think this has a lot of ingredients to just open up. Again, also conditioned by the same factors we're talking about in terms of potential chain reaction from what happens elsewhere, but also because the state both of these teams go into the game at. Spurs games have almost been free-for-alls lately. And despite all that, we have actually had the consistency of Harry Kane scoring. And he will fancy that Leeds defence as it is right now. So again, I'm pushing it out there. Maybe stolen Mark's thunder a little bit here because he's going quite high as well for over 3.5.
Okay, yeah, and we'll hand it over to Mark O'Hare. Just a quick one, Mark, on the maybe motivational factor for Tottenham. So going into the final game, there's one Conference League spot available. You alluded to that earlier. Villa 58, Spurs 57, Brentford 56. Brentford hosts Man City. Realistically, they probably won't get 3 points there. And Villa have Brighton, so like that, they could also drop points here. How motivated would Ryan Mason be to try and get that last European spot?
I think he'll be motivated, but what about his players?
The rest of them,
they look like they've checked out a while ago. I think they could be considered to be on the beach. I know they started quite promisingly against Brentford last week, but as soon as the equaliser went in, they just capitulated a little bit, really. And I think there's quite a few players at that club who are probably looking for an exit door. There's still upheaval off the pitch. The managerial chase has been a disaster yet again. So there's not a lot I like about Spurs, and I think Leeds have got a good opportunity here. I'd be much more comfortable backing Leeds at 284 to beat Spurs than Everton at 149 against Bournemouth. Same scenario, really, but it's even more so heightened for Leeds in terms of being it must win. But yeah, Spurs, what is it? 1 win in 8 away now since January in the Premier League. They've conceded 2 goals more in 6 of those 8 away days. Across all venues, 1 clean sheet in 12, 5 defeats in 7, 2 wins in 10. One of those was a deeply undeserving win against Brighton as well. So Tottenham are not a team I'd be trusting as favourites away against anybody right now, irrespective of the situation. So I would make Leeds slightly shorter than they are, but there's no way I could be trusting Leeds either, a team that's won 7 matches all season. I thought there were flickers of promise and potential. We talked about them in the last 20 against Man City. The game was long gone before then anyhow, and then the game against Newcastle, I thought there were signs of possible progress, but they were utterly atrocious last weekend in a fixture that looked all set up for them, really, with West Ham players being on the beers after qualifying for the final, the European final. But it's just gone terribly badly for Leeds since beating Forest at home in early April. A win would put them in a really good position to survive. They've taken 2 points from the possible 24 since then, 6 defeats and 8 winless games. That includes defeats by 2-1, 3-1, 4-1, 5-1 and 6-1. And they've collapsed all too easily, all too often. And that defence has been an issue for years as well. But just more recently, they've been failing to take some good opportunities in the final third as well. So my worry for Leeds, or backing any sort of pro Leeds bet here, is if results do filter through from elsewhere, there is a danger that they can disintegrate. And that's why I've settled on goals here, because I would be astonished if Leeds won this match with a clean sheet. So if Leeds are going to win this, I can't see them doing it without stopping Spurs scoring, because Spurs have scored in all but 4 Premier League games this season. But actually, if you go to the raw numbers over the course of the whole campaign, as well as more recently, it's overwhelmingly in your favour if you're going to back goals here. So we've got over 3.5 goals at 242. 11 of Leeds' last 12 have featured at least 3 goals. 8 of those 12 went over 3.5. All 12 saw both teams oblige. 44% of matches at Ellen Road have gone over 3.5 goals. 56% of Tottenham's away days have gone over 3.5 goals. In their last 11, 9 have gone over 2.5, 7 have gone over 3.5, and 10 have seen both teams scoring. So the 242 says we've got a 41% chance of over 3.5 goals landing here. Yet the seasonal averages in home and away matches involving these two teams, as well as the more recent matches, as we reach the conclusion of the campaign, all suggest goals here. So, chuck in the state of play if Spurs are motivated to try and finish in the European positions, plus Leeds scrapping for their lives, plus the potential for them to just be all over really at half time. If, let's say, Everton are 3 goals up at half time or something similar like that filters through after about an hour, it could get quite ugly for them if they do chuck it in early. So, I think goals is the safest passage here.
Okay, yeah, goals for Mark O'Hare, agreeing with Miguel. And Adrian, you have a goals angle here and an interesting angle, and you're kind of bringing a little bit of that narrative that Miguel talked about on the final day and maybe the mayhem involved in the final day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I found this really tricky because over 3.5, I know the Migs loves it. He loves it. He loves to push the boat out, but I'm always a little bit scared by a line that high. Both teams to score is unbackable. It's too skinny. So I was thinking, I don't know if I've got a bet here, because I absolutely can't trust Leeds and can't trust Spurs, especially away from home. What I saw from them last week, so I worked on the game against Brentford, was actually a very good first half performance. Kulusevski in behind Kane worked very well, and they look dangerous as a team going forward. It was just the moment Brentford actually started trying, the moment Brentford put a bit of aggression into their game, Spurs wilted. So I think the message from Allardyce has to be clear here. Get in Tottenham's faces, make it horrible for them, and see if they fancy it. And the body of evidence over the course of this season would indicate that Tottenham as a group don't fancy it when the going gets tough. And that's Leeds' best chance of glory here. I think that scoring that first goal across the weekend is big. So I do think Leeds will go for it, especially as they're the ones chasing from the furthest part away. So I think Sam Allardyce will get them revved up for a really, really quick start, and they've got to go for it. They've got to. But Tottenham are up against one of the worst defences in the Premier League. They've got Harry Kane, who's got a phenomenal record on the final day. No one in Premier League history has scored more goals on the final weekend than Harry. So he's almost nailed on to get at least one. I was looking at the numbers of first half goals, especially conceded. Spurs conceded 31 first half goals. That's the third worst record in the division. Only Bournemouth and Leicester have conceded more. And Leeds, pretty similar, 29 first half goals conceded. That's the next in line. So they're both used to getting off to bad starts defensively. We know that Leeds have to go for it in an attacking sense. Spurs, in a way, I think, the attack has to be the best form of defence for them here. Mason will definitely care about this. He'll do his best to motivate the players. So I expect Spurs to go for it. I personally think Spurs are more likely to win the game, actually, but I can't put money on that. So, but I can tip up over 1.5 first half goals. That's where I'm coming from here. I just think it's a case of it could be a little bit crazy right from the get-go here. 2 very bad defences. And yeah, I think we'll see them slug it out over the course of the game. So look, if we see two first half goals, it lands at a price of 2.14, which I think is one of the more attractive bets around this match, because a lot of it you can't be sure on.
Okay, yeah, interesting play from Adrian there. Over 1.5 first half goals, 2.14. We'll go with the majority of the over 3.5 goals. at our 2.42 to see. Hopefully the game does descend into chaos.